Hey guys, today on the channel we're going to be talking about oil pumps. Specifically, the oil pumps in these old Jeeps back here. So you've seen the Jeep a few times, you know we've got a couple of motors we're building for it. And we got most of it built and we found out we had a problem with the oil pump. So the pump that we had in here, it's got this specific design in it. This is a later model for the F134 that's got the eccentric that goes around the outside of it. I'm not sure what the actual technical term for it is. And it slides out of there. Let's see if it'll slide out today. It's got some sticky pre-lube type grease on it, so it may not come all the way out. And it doesn't look like it wants to come out today, but so this inner piece, it's got a little bit of play in it. This outer piece, the oil comes in one side, gets squished, shot out the other side, circulates through the motor. There's what the other side of it looks like. This gear rides on the camshaft. So your camshaft drives the oil pump, and there's a key in here. I don't know if you can see it for the lighting. There's a slot in there. There we go. And that drives the distributor. So camshaft drives the oil pump drives the distributor. If anything breaks in that chain, the motor could turn over and over, but your distributor won't turn, you won't get any fire. That was a condition we ran into last time we built everything, and we're like, why isn't this thing firing? It turns out the distributor wasn't turning. Upon research, we found out the gear on this oil pump had broken. And it's right here. So I saved it. Show you guys this. You can see it sheared a couple of teeth off of it. And what had happened is something bound up in the oil pump, and it held this really tight. And these gears they're cast, they're kind of brittle. So if the camshaft's spinning, this is seized up, this is probably what's going to break. Now we have another different oil pump. We were able to switch gears. This is one off of an older style engine. And you can see this one has a slightly different set of gears, but the same theory. Gears spin around, take the oil from one side, squish it, pressurize it going out the other. And this one piece comes out, and the other gear it'll slide out by itself. So there we go. Come here. There we go. So that gear slides out there. The other one slides out there. Anyway, so when you put these back together, you want to make sure they're absolutely clean, because there's very fine tolerances in these oil pumps. That's how they work and build the pressure. And here's a similar eccentric set out of I think this is actually out of a chainsaw or another small motor. And you can see there's just a little bit of a gap in there. If anything gets in there, it gets stuck, it will seize this. You can see this one doesn't quite spin quite as smooth because there's a little bit of gunk in there. So the gap between here is very sensitive, and the backing plate that it rides up against is also very sensitive. So when this is in the motor, whichever motor we're talking about, these literally do rub on this plate. Now you don't want them to be mashed in there really hard. You want them just touching, because any oil that goes through this gap right here, you're going to lose oil pressure. So you want these touching, but you don't want them touching really tight, just enough to keep the oil in there. So one of the things we found when we put this pump together originally, we put a thin gasket in here to keep this from leaking, because the first time we put this plate on here and cinched it down, everything was so tight that this wouldn't spin. But now with this gasket in here, it's a fairly decent sized gasket, it will slide. But you see that? There's just enough play in there that there's going to be a gap between the end of these gears and this plate. And there'll be about that much of a gap. And that's enough to lose oil pressure. When we take this gasket out, before I put this in here and put the bolts down, it would be tight. Now, right now I can do it with my hands because I don't have any bolts in here and I'm just holding it with my fingers. But even right there, I can see that's tight if I'm holding it with my hands. So we can either put a real thin shim in here, or we're going to smooth these off. We're going to get some real fine sandpaper. We're going to polish these so that there's no imperfections in here. We're going to polish the inside of this, make sure there's no imperfections in here. You can see there's a little bit of RTV sealant around here. I don't think this is causing a problem, but if there's any here on the edges that's dragging, that might be just enough to stop it from spinning. Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out is this old motor that we took apart. You can see this one actually did have a real thin gasket right here. I mean, that's like absolutely just paper thin. So after we do all the cleaning and polishing, if that doesn't work, we're going to have to find a real small, thin gasket. Some places you used to be able to find a real thin metal shim that could fit here, but I don't know of any place that carries those shims anymore. There's probably a few places online I could look into if polishing these gears doesn't work, but we're going to start there. But yeah, when you put these back together, you want to make sure that everything's absolutely clean in here and that the tension on this end plate is exactly right, because you want it tight enough to hold the oil in there, but not so tight you can't spin this. Because if I cinch that down with the bolts and don't spin it, see that right there? We don't want to break this gear on that camshaft again. And before I put everything together, I did look in there. I got my borescope in and I looked at the camshaft. And the camshaft looks like it's in pretty good shape. There's a few really small nicks on it, but nothing terrible. And I think this gear took all the damage. So like I said, we replaced this. If I have to buy a new oil pump, there's that eccentric, it fell out of there. The new oil pump will be about $250, $300. The rebuild kit for these is $54, but we have all the parts here on hand, and they all look physically in good shape. So we're going to try to polish this up, put this back together first, and see if we can get that to work. That's all I've got for right now. If you got more questions about the oil pumps, let me know. Like I said, I've got two different designs here. I wish that I could just have straight swapped them out, but the holes on the inside of the pump are a little bit different where they align to the block. Let's see if I can hold this up without dumping everything on the ground. If you look at the inside of the pump, they're slightly different. Where these holes line up on the block are a little bit different. This one's got an extra little bypass in here, right there. But I will build these back together and we'll let you know how it came out.